Okay, right. So we shall start again. And so I guess the question that I'm trying to answer today is, what's the deal with serverless? You know, like, it's always interesting that there's all these hype words that come up, and then everyone starts using them, and then suddenly it's everything now. Like, it's something like cloud. You know, someone's called something cloud, and now everything is cloud, and you don't know what is actually really cloud. So what is serverless anyway? So to answer this, I guess I have to go back to the beginning to kind of show, you know, why we came up with the idea of serverless to begin. So we need to look at evolution. How did we get to the point where we needed such a weird thing as serverless? And it all began with this. Does anyone recognize this actually? Wow, okay. Well, sure. But you know, like, without this, we probably would not have a job, because this is the world's first web server. It's the machine on which Sir Tim Berners-Lee wrote and kind of deployed his first HTTP web server back in 1990. And you know, at this time, you didn't really care about anything because the internet wasn't really a thing, and also the World Wide Web wasn't really a thing either. Like, there was only he was the only person using it. There was no one else. You didn't care about anything else. And originally, he wrote the World Wide, he built the World Wide Web as a way to easily access information on other machines. Because earlier there was no standard, so each machine had its own data, and you had different ways to access it. There was no one way to access all of it. So he's like, you know, what if we put together, you know, DNS and then some TCP, and then also have the idea of linking from one page to another, so that you can easily go from page to page without having to use some kind of terminal or access. You know, and that was really the genius idea, where you have all these pages that are linked together, and you can jump from page to page like hypertext. So this was the world's first web server, and you don't really care about anything at this point. And then you move on to something like this. Can anyone guess what this is?
Google.
Wow. Okay. So it is actually. This is one of Google's first production servers. And you know, by the time Google started, which was in the late 90s, you know, the internet was kind of going somewhere. Actually, a lot of people were getting incredibly excited about the internet, maybe too much. That led to the dot-com crash. You know, doesn't matter. But you know, now you had the problem of having to serve more users. So just having one machine was not going to cut it. You needed more power. And you had more power by doing the simplest trick in the book. You put a bunch of computers together. And this is exactly what this is. This is like a cluster of computers. And this is purely because of scale. You wanted to serve more users. And you know, this is kind of how the status quo of having some kind of web service in the late 90s or early 2000s is that if you wanted to do some kind of web application, you needed to have your own physical server. That was the norm. You needed to have your server, you need to have it in a basement, that's it. And you know, having a physical server is actually quite painful. First off, you need some guy to, you know, understand this entire mess. You know, understand how to connect it, how to maintain it. Then there's also the cost of owning these servers. You need to be able to afford such things, and I'm pretty sure this isn't cheap. And then thirdly, there's also the time. You know, you can't just say you know, I'm thinking of maybe building a web application right now, you know, and I want to, you know, build it by the end of today. It's not going to happen, because you need to order a server, have it be delivered to you, and then only can you start your service. And this is just painful. So it was really painful to really get started with some kind of web service. And so some guy came up with the idea, yeah, why don't we start selling servers? You know, why don't we start, you know, providing computing services, so that, you know, we will take care of all the hardware, and you can just take care of building your application and running it on the hardware. And so that is how we slowly came to, what I was mentioning before, the cloud. You know, And it's also the point at which things get abstract. That's why I can't show a real picture here, because now it's the point where we escape beyond the physical and go into kind of the virtual. And so one guy was like, yeah, let's just sell the servers. And this worked quite some way for a long time, until that wasn't also enough. Because just because you have a server doesn't mean you'll be able to run a web app. You still need to do much more things outside of a web app. You have to install the OS, install the packages, install the development environment, and then also keep it going. You have to also have some kind of load balancer to make sure that like shuffle the load between different servers. And yeah, so there was still like a little bit of overhead on what you had to do. And also at the same time, especially in the early 2000s, the idea of virtual machines really started to catch up. And the idea of a virtual machine is that, in reality you have one machine, but when it comes to computing power, it's multiple. It's like running maybe 10 Windows machines on one Windows laptop. And that's exactly what virtualized machines is. And that really like catapulted the cloud, because it didn't mean that if you had 10 customers, you needed 10 servers. You can just have one server and have that serve all 10 applications for all of your 10 customers. And it was also around, like maybe I guess mid-2000s, that someone at Amazon had this like crazy idea. He was thinking to himself, we have all these servers that are really not doing much. What if we start selling the free time that these servers have? And that is how AWS started. It's literally this. It's like, yeah, why don't we sell the parts, like the user resources that we don't use? And with AWS initially started also like, computers for sale, or rather like distant computers for sale. But eventually it evolved into what is a PaaS, like platform as a service. And essentially a platform as a service gives you everything you need to run your code. So essentially the provider is like, just give us your code base, and with some kind of magic, we will take care of it. We will somehow run your code base. You don't have to take care of anything else. Just give us your code, give us a configuration file saying how we should run this code, and we'll take care of the rest. You still had some manual configuration to do, especially with scaling. You have to configure like how many copies of the application you wanted to run at once. But for the most part, a lot of the hassle of deploying a web application was taken away. And to be honest, I think a lot of the web applications these days, they follow this structure. It's very rarely you would try to buy your entire try to have access to a bare bones server. You would most probably just have the code base and run it without really caring about where the server is and how the server is configured. And only there are, of course, cases where you need control of that, but for the most part, you don't. And yeah, so most applications these days are built for PaaSes, like platforms as services. But this wasn't quite enough. We could do even better. So now, with the emerging trend of serverless, or more correctly, serverless functions, the idea is that the provider is only asking you to give a function. Not even an entire code base, just a simple function with some kind of end result, and we will magically take care of that as well. And that is essentially serverless functions. You simplify the entire process down to the point where you are dealing with the smallest unit of your code possible, which is the function. So to recap the evolution, we started off with a single server, which became a cluster, which became a virtualized cluster, to a platform as a service, and then to finally to serverless. And this evolution was, like I mentioned before, was driven primarily through the need for scale, as in you wanted to serve more and more people and more users at the same time, and also for ease of use. And I think, right now, a lot of us take for granted just how easy it is to deploy a web application. It's stupidly easy. There are free platforms, freeze and no waiting time, flexible time, like flexible cost, all of that you get for free. And the biggest, like one of the big key things about serverless is that it's even more cost effective than like passes, because you are charged per like even hundreds of milliseconds your function runs. You are not charged for like spinning up the instance, because spinning up an instance takes time. And usually a lot of these free tier services, they also like spin down the instance because they are free. But with serverless, you don't really have to deal with that at all. Your function is always available, and you will only be charged for the code that actually runs. Like, so I guess the most common serverless platform right now is, of course, like AWS Lambda. It's kind of become synonymous with the concept of being serverless. Like, serverless is Lambda. That's kind of how it goes. So to just demystify how Lambda works in like a very, very basic way, I would go back to like, computing 101, the stuff that I guess I learned when I was in the second grade, when they asked me what a computer is. It's essentially, a computer is something that takes an input and then produces an output through a process actually. Yeah. And so this is essentially what a function is as well. You have an input of parameters and you have an output, which is either some modification to the input or some kind of side effect, some kind of change to the outside world through an actuator or something like this. So when you take this paradigm of functions and you bring it to Lambda, what you essentially do is that in AWS you have all these services. You have S3, which like AWS has like an entire cocktail of services, but these are maybe some of them. So you have S3 for file storage. You have API gateway, which exposes like some REST endpoints. You have SES, which is for emails, and then you have Alexa for voice. And what you do with Lambdas is that you connect these services together, essentially. So you can, like, it works in the terms of events. So each of these services will like raise an event saying like something happened, and then you write your own code to respond to that event, and you respond also through one of these services, right? And you can write your code using quite a variety of languages. And I will give you bonus points if you can tell me what this is. Wow, okay. Yeah, so it is Go. Like, I don't discover that recently, that is the Go's logo. And so I guess the best way to show how this works is with an example. Like one of the things that I'm kind of slightly obsessed by is image quality. Like, I really can't stand when someone sends me a picture or WhatsApp or Messenger. It's absolutely terrible. They destroy your image because they want to optimize it for faster sends, and in the process they destroy your image. So every time I always ask people to send me the raw image. So with using a Lambda, what I can do is I can ask it to monitor a mailbox to say if any email comes in with the attachment, and then I can write my own script to for this event, so that it will now upload it to S3. So you connect these services together. You can also maybe write an API endpoint, let's say /get users or /get people, and that can be read from S3 or some other database service that they have and respond it. And that's also through a Lambda. And essentially, serverless relies quite a lot on asynchronicity and also on events. It's based on it's primarily structured around having, let's say, events, and you have an event and then you respond to that event. So how I got started to play around with serverless was also when I was working with my blog. And I'm also slightly fanatical about performance. I'm the guy who's obsessed about image sizes. I'm also going to be slightly obsessed about page loading times. And I also started out with the WordPress blog, and you've seen Voyager's presentation. It was slow. It was bad, and it was especially bad because I insisted that I'm not paying not going to pay a lot for my hosting. So I had $5 hosting, and so it was even worse. So it was incredibly slow. And maybe I could have made it faster by simply buying more expensive hosting, but that's kind of boring. So I decided I'm gonna migrate to like static sites, migrate to Gatsby essentially, and that is when I came across netlify. Netlify is like a really great static site host that lets you host your static site. And then what makes netlify really cool is that first of all, it's for free. You get quite a large amount of bandwidth and storage. Like you get almost unlimited bandwidth and 50 gigabytes of storage, give or less. And this is kind of like unheard of when it comes to and it's free. Like who gives this away for free? Like I guess almost no one does. So this was like a really big motivator for me to try out netlify. And the other cool thing is it comes with its own free continuous integration, which is what he mentioned, like the build step that goes from the Git repository to the static site. And I don't know about you guys, but I have to say like continuous integration, this automatic building of the site, it kind of really changes everything. Because you save so much time when it comes to deployments. You don't think about deployment at all. You just think you hit push, done. Push to Git, everything's taken care of. And it's a really, really easy way, easy way to work with things. So that's how I got started with netlify. And when I moved to netlify, I found the hard way that static content has in its name the word static. And it took me I learned the hard way that it really means static, that you can't have anything dynamic pretty easily. You really need to bring some other stuff in to make stuff dynamic on the site. And so that is how I came across another netlify thing, which is netlify functions. Netlify functions is essentially built on AWS Lambda and the API gateway, which and lets you write functions in JavaScript and in Go. And you could think of it as you take the already easy concept of Lambda and you make it even simpler. So simple in the fact that I will do something that I've never done in any one of my presentations so far, is that I will try to do a live demo where I will deploy the whole thing from an empty repository into netlify, just to show how easy it is to work with and how static functions can work. So here's my editor. As you see, this is all I have done so far is create this repository, and as you see, it's completely empty. And I also have set up netlify, and only thing I have done so far is just say new site from Git and link this all through the web interface, nothing more. So I will go in here, and then I will go to functions, and I will tell, I will go to settings, and then to build and deploy, and then I will tell it where my functions are going to be. Oops, it's not here.
Maybe Mesh? Could you maybe switch a bit to the left? Or
yeah, I should have left the projector on the top.
this is better.
So yeah, just set it up. Well, okay, there is one page here where you're supposed to set up the function, where the functions are supposed to run. That is all I have done so far, nothing else. Yeah. So I will now start, this is a completely empty repo, and what I'm going to try to build is, if you guys remember in the early 2000s, there used to be these joke SMS services, where, I don't know whether it was actually in Czech Republic, but back home there used to be this number where you can text, and they will text back with some joke, and you pay a few, few rupees or few crowns to for it. So I'm essentially going to be building this service where if you go to a website, you will see a joke, a randomly generated joke. This is why this project is called Get It. If you got that. So I'm going to be going completely from the beginning. I don't even have a project. And then I'm going to be adding, I'm sorry, this is actually Node. So if you guys are not so familiar with Node, then it might be a bit, so all I did is, essentially this is how Node works. This is one of the great things about the NPM Node ecosystem, is that there's a package for everything. including there's a package for this as well. So now I will just create a new file. So I actually configured netlify to have all the functions in the functions folder like this. Actually, should find it.
Functions directory. Functions directory.
Where was it?
Lower.
Oh, there you go.
Deploy settings.
Yeah, exactly. So this is exactly what I did. I set it up to be functions. So now I have the functions folder, and I will create this. And how netlify works is that if you create a JavaScript, like a file called getIt, that will be the name of your endpoint. So later, I will go to like netlify/function/getIt, and that will run this function. You don't need to do anything else. You don't have to set up any routing or anything. You just do this. And now I just write the code for it. And essentially, this is how serverless would work as well. Like you would export like a function like this, and this function will be called with an event. This event will have all the details of how the function was called. Like it will have like the name of the endpoint, like the user agent of your browser, the IP addresses, every like the metadata around which event started will be in this parameter, and then you would make a response by calling the callback. So now I would do joke service dot get random bad joke joke
Bad joke.
and callback, and here I will.
Is it dead joke, not bad joke?
Yeah.
Dad joke.
Bad joke.
Okay.
It is a thing, man.
You don't think that your dad does.
And so like usually this is how I would call it back by saying like usually the error is set to the first parameter, and now this is not an error, so I will just do like it's not error, and then I will just have status code 200, which is like HTTP 200, and then the body. And this is like the ugliest way to do HTML. Don't do this. It's just because I'm doing this within 5 minutes. Yeah, and that's it. So now all I need to do is commit it.
Maybe put h1 backslash
Yeah.
one close on the
Close,
side.
close.
Yeah.
Nice. Oh, it's trying to commit my node modules. That's bad. This is why you should not do live demos. Wait, this is ridiculous. You know what? I'm gonna commit my node modules.
Oh. Maybe put slash after node modules.
Nah, it works. It's fine.
Okay.
So, I will commit it. And push it. go, it's pushed, and now if you go back to netlify, you can see that it's trying to build it. And this is the cool thing, like, I just pushed it and it's building by itself. And it will, and ideally it should not be trying to install other shit like Ruby and PHP as well. But I believe my configuration is incomplete. As you saw, my repository is empty. So if I explicitly declared like this is a yarn repository or a node repository, it would not try to auto-guess it. And there you go, site is live. So now if I just go to functions and get it, and then go here, let's see whether it works. What do you think? Will it work or not? There you go. And as you see, like my URL is like I set up the domain in this place to be like netget, not netlify, and all the functions are deployed to the subdirectory like this, like .netlify.functions. And now when I go to it, there you go. You have a joke service in 7 minutes or 6. It's terrible. The jokes are terrible. Yeah. So the reason why I had to really get into it is because, like I was saying, it was because of the dynamic content, and as a result, everything on my blog, everything that is dynamic, which is like the email subscriptions or the comments, they are all powered by netlify functions. Like I have written netlify functions that will like. It's an endpoint, so the code here calls that endpoint, and that endpoint will save the data to somewhere. In my case, it's an Excel spreadsheet, because again, I'm not paying for hosting. And yeah, so that is essentially why I went to netlify functions. And I forgot to mention, the reason specifically netlify functions is because it's you have 125,000 requests free per month, and as you saw, it's so easy to set up. Oh, this kind of spoils the breakdown of it, but yeah. So the lessons learned from my experiment with serverless is that you still need a data source. It's kind of the hard part when it comes to serverless is that serverless is just taking care of running the code. It still doesn't have anywhere to persist the data that you're storing. So in my case, I jumped on the serverless bandwagon without thinking, yeah, there is no server that will remember all the things that I'm submitting to it. So, and it's kind of like the cunning trick of like a lot of the providers as well. They will give you all, like Lambda is free, but the database server you need to pay. So this, you have to think about where you need to store your data still. And in my case, I came up with storing it to an Excel sheet. So yeah, it will suffice for now. And yeah, and serverless will not be effective for like heavy compute loads. Like if you are trying to solve cancer, probably serverless is not the way to go, because it comes down to the pricing model, right? Like you are priced per second, so it's really ideally suited for if you have like a very simple operation that has either a small number of times you're calling it or an unknown capacity, especially unknown capacity. Like when you think about the functions that I implemented, like comments or email subscriptions, like my blog is like has almost no traffic, so it has almost no there's not many people calling this function. So for that, it's for me it's free because I'm below the 125,000 free limit. And also, even if it went beyond that, I would pay much less because the pricing for serverless functions is much less than it would be for an instance. And the other benefit is the unknown capacity part, because you don't have to set up anything related to scaling. You just set up the function and it will scale up or down, and you can have any number of people calling this function, no problem, and it will always be responsive. And all of that will be taken care of. Like normally that would be the end of the presentation, but I have to really mention like all the lessons I learned in the process of building this, and that is that what I essentially did was I built a function that has a API, like an endpoint, and I like send the comments to it, and it persists the comments to an Excel sheet. And instead of like writing my own code and figuring out how Google Sheets API worked, which is actually not so nice, what I could have actually done was use something like Zapier. Have you guys heard of Zapier? Zapier is have you heard of IFTTT then? Like if then this that? No, if then that.
It is then that.
If this then that. Yes, that's what it is. So if this then that. So it's essentially a web platform that lets you connect two web services together. So you can say like, hey, if I got an email, do this. So Zapier is like a level below IFTTT in the fact that you can also like write some more code to customize it, and essentially that would have been ideal for me because it has like a webhook, which is like a way like HTTP. Essentially, a webhook is like a HTTP address that I can call, and it has also the ability to like add stuff to an Excel sheet. So I could have built all of this through Zapier as well. But the true thing about building something is you always figure out a better way to build it after you have built it. So this is my takeaways. Yeah. So would you guys have any questions
What about debugging?
about?
Debug.
Okay, about for the functions you mean?
Yeah, so if I just write something slightly more
Yes.
complicated
Yes.
and want to debug it.
So here once the function is running, you see the output to the console, and also you can see that it's not modules. It has to have at least one error. So it's complaining about deprecated options, and I can actually show you like my actual site is also hosted through this account. So I have my functions. Like I actually have this function which sends out the emails whenever you commit something to the Git repository. And how it works is it watches for like a commit message, and if it matches the commit message, it will send out emails.
It's a kind of console log.
Yeah, exactly. So it's actually surprisingly easy to debug. And well, I think right now there would not be an output because I haven't done a deploy in some time.
And there is no like, let's say, put the breakpoint somewhere.
Well, the thing is, you can if you want to debug it some more, like it's essentially Node, like so you can run that part of the code like locally on your local instance, and then you can push it up. And there's also like netlify gives you tools, some kind of like debugging tools that let you run netlify functions locally. Yeah.
I didn't get the pumpkin joke. Yeah, the first
Oh,
joke.
okay.
Squash.
Yeah,
What's the favorite
what's the
part
fun?
of the pumpkin? It's a squash.
Wait, I don't have that. And
I don't have it.
well, also I have no way to go back to that.
Yeah.
That is in version 10.
But I still didn't get the like relation to dead jokes. Like I didn't get the dead joke, and then like it's about pumpkins, about grapes.
That's a dad joke essentially.
Okay, so
Yeah. A dad joke
It's
is
a
a
bad
joke
joke.
that is terrible, that only your dad would make. That is
Oh, yeah,
incredibly
oh, I
funny.
didn't know that. Okay,
Yeah.
okay. I don't have any other questions.
Uh,
No, except that like you should have mentioned user functions. It's also a cool thing.
Yeah, so like netlify functions is again just one option for this.
Yeah.
You can have there are like all the big players I know this game. You have Lambda, you have Azure, you have Google Cloud with their own platforms. But like I said, I went with netlify functions primarily because it came with netlify and it was free for like 125,000 calls, and for me it ticked all the right boxes. And actually for me the comments, like I built my own like static man, to be honest, because the static man that Wojtek was talking about, it has like one instance, like one server, which goes down because it has like so many people using it. So I took the static man core, which was in Node, and I threw it into a netlify function container. So it will now static man is running inside netlify. So it's essentially the same core, but the surrounding thing is like I'm hosting my own static man essentially in netlify functions, not in a nutshell. And you could do like with very minimal changes, you can I think take almost any Node application and bring it over to like a serverless platform. because essentially you need, like, if you know Node, you would usually have like Express to like serve your application, and netlify does all the stuff that Express would do for you. Like, because it has the routing, right? So you don't need like another additional layer of routing on top. You just need to, you don't need Express. Like, Express is primarily for routing. So except for maybe middlewares and
A little bit of topic question. If you just scale up a little bit from Lambda function, what about, for example, Docker containers?
Okay.
Do this netlify just support something like this or not?
Well, no. I'm pretty sure like some of the like AWS of course has this, but like Docker containers is like moving away from the abstraction, right? Like Docker containers is kind of going back to the point where you are kind of concerned with like how your code base is going to be hosted. Here it's just like I have something that needs to happen and I'm taking care of it with just this code and I'm not concerned with anything else. Okay, alright. Well, thank you for your attention.